We are now live on Facebook, so welcome to all of our Facebook users. Thank you for joining us. My name is Kate Keatley and I'm the Head of Support and Service Development at Blood Cancer UK. And tonight we are looking at ways of coping during the festive period, because we know that this can be both a celebration, and many of our panellists are celebrating with us today, but there are also challenges for people, and many people are thinking about how they're going to cope whilst they're maybe remembering someone they've lost or going through a particularly difficult time with treatment or a new diagnosis. So we've got a fantastic group of panellists for us tonight, and I'm going to introduce them in just a second. But actually, I wanted to go over a little bit of housekeeping first. So for those of you joining us on Zoom, then if you have any questions, then please do ask them in the chat, and we'll try and cover some of those in our discussion and come to those as we can. But for anyone joining us on Facebook, then we're unlikely to be able to come to those during the session, but we will try and get back to as many of you as we possibly can during the course of the week. So do look out for that response and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. The second thing to say is that we're very aware of the ongoing and regularly changing news regarding the Omicron coronavirus variant. We have tonight updated our health information web pages to reflect some of these changes and regarding supporting you as best we can to manage that risk and uncertainty that you might be feeling at the moment. So please do take a look at those if you want any more information around what we know so far. But we also know it's a rapidly changing situation, and we will keep these pages updated as best we possibly can throughout the coming weeks and months. And we'll keep everyone updated on our social media pages as well. So please do read those, look out for changes, and if anyone wants to contact us for support, to ask a question or maybe talk through how any of this might affect them, then please do. So back to tonight. We are very privileged to be joined today by a number of our blood cancer community, and each of them have different experiences around managing blood cancer at Christmas. And the festive period more generally. We're not just focused on Christmas, but rather all of the different celebrations and festivities going on throughout the month. So I, without any further ado, will pass over to them to tell us a little bit more about themselves and particularly why they wanted to join the panel tonight. So Donna, if you can hear us, I'm going to come to you first, if that's okay.
Yeah, I can hear you. I hope you can all hear me, even though you can't see me.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the reason it was important to me to take part in this is my daughter Emily was actually diagnosed Christmas week with blood cancer. So Emily, being the eldest of four, obviously got the challenge of a diagnosis and the challenge of trying to have a bit of normality and Christmas for the other children. She then relapsed the following Christmas, which again poses its own problems and different problems. And then unfortunately, she passed away 5 years ago. So we now look at celebrating Christmas in a very different way in her memory and with new traditions, very much a nod to the past, but very much for new traditions. So.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you for sharing that with us. Jude, can I come to you next?
Hi everybody, my name's Jude and I'm one of the Scottish ambassadors for Blood Cancer UK. I am married to someone who has a rare form of non-Hodgkin's, and he was diagnosed in the run-up to Christmas, so we've had experience of what it feels like when everyone else is just really happy and your world has crumbled. So hopefully it'll be useful for everyone to have that conversation a bit.
Thank you, Jude. Sunny, could I come to you next, please?
Of course, yes. My name is Sunny, and I was also diagnosed with a rare form of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma on my 35th birthday. And what really motivated me to join the panel was actually coming out of hospital around the Christmas time and being in the point where I was struggling the most with the side effects of chemo and not wanting to go out and be seen by people. So hopefully sharing my experience and how I coped with it can help others who may be facing similar difficulties.
Thank you, Sunny. Thank you for sharing. Vij, can I come to you next, please?
Yeah, hi, I'm Vij, and I was diagnosed with polycythemia vera in August 2020 in the midst of the start of lockdown or lockdown 1. And I'm here today. I've been involved in many projects with Blood Cancer UK, including the forum. And yeah, basically I'm here as a representative for someone who's going through their first proper Christmas. They didn't really count last year. It's kind of written off. Yeah, obviously, hopefully I can share my anxieties and things I'm looking forward to with those that are watching.
Great, thank you, Vij. And lastly, Gemma, can I come to you?
Hi, my name's Gemma. I'm the nurse advisor for the support services at Blood Cancer UK. I've been in post since September early, so my job, along with my brilliant colleagues, is to support our community over the phones, on social media, the forum, by email, and hopefully give support and advice. I previously was a nurse specialist for acute leukemia patients, so have experienced many festive periods managing our patients and trying to give them mechanisms to cope with the period ahead.
Thank you, Gemma, and thank you to everyone for joining us. And I hope, kind of even in the introductions, you're able to see that our panelists reflect many different experiences that may well touch on some of the things you've experienced as well if you're listening. So what we wanted to do today is to spend a little bit of time talking about what we see as some of the challenges, and I think our panelists have talked through some of that in their introduction already. And see how those challenges are kind of impacting both your own emotions, but also those that you're close to. And I think we want to talk about kind of how society more generally impacts that as well. But I think it's important, as well as sharing the challenges, to also share what we feel has worked well for us in terms of managing some of these concerns and these challenges, how we've done this. And so we want to focus in the second half of our session on ways of coping that we hope will be useful for some of the people who are listening today. So just to get us started, I want to ask each of our panelists a couple of things. So perhaps if we come to Vij first, could you tell us a little bit about what you're mostly concerned about and what you're thinking about regarding yourself over Christmas?
Yeah, I think one thing that I'm sure many people can resonate with is, I think because obviously Christmas is like the main time where family get together and friends get together, and particularly during lockdown, it'd be the first opportunity for people to see other people, as well as for me to see them, but them to see me. And we've not really had a chance to talk about the cancer and how things have been going. However, it is one thing that I've been constantly thinking about for the whole year. And one thing that I'm really anxious about is the day just being taken over by people just asking me about my cancer, my treatments, my medication, my appointments. And I'm just wanting just a day off. And I think that, like with most people who I've spoken to that are going through a very similar thing, is I want to be seen as Vij the person, not Vij with cancer. And that's something that I know that is going to be very difficult to shake off. And I think even with my job, it's people see me as just being a teacher. And I think that in terms of common conversation, or just to start a conversation, particularly those with cancer, it's you don't know how to start a conversation. Because obviously you're aware of people's condition, but you don't know what it is, but you don't want just to be, that's it. You want to talk about other things and take your mind off things. And particularly with Christmas, it's such a good reason to just enjoy yourself and get your feet up. But I'm really anxious about people just focusing on that because they don't have any idea on how to talk to me now, because of they don't want to be seen as being too joyous, because they don't know to what extent that I'm going through or how I'm feeling. And it's just kind of like reading the room. And I think that's difficult when you're feeling wanting to not talk about it, but then people do want to talk about it because it's convenient for them and not. And I think that's what I'm probably really anxious about.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Vij. That's really useful insight, I think, in terms of how someone might manage or what challenges they might be facing if they're coming into contact with somebody for the first time after a diagnosis. And I guess there's something there around knowing how to manage your own emotions and thinking about how that might impact other people. And Jude, I wonder if kind of you've got any experiences you want to share around kind of taking that time to yourself, and maybe some of the conflicts that you might experience there.
Yeah, we're a few years kind of into our experience. So my husband was initially diagnosed less than a month before Christmas, and his prognosis was spectacularly bad. So it didn't appear that he would make Christmas, which fairly puts Christmas into perspective. But what it did mean was we really had to make very, very quick decisions about what Christmas might look like or feel like, or what was important and what wasn't. And actually, as absolutely awful as that was, we also had a young child, and it was really important to have some sense of the magic of Christmas, because they were young enough to still need that and still deserve it fundamentally. Their whole world had been turned upside down, but Santa still needed to make a visit, and it still had to be absolutely as it should be for a child. And I think every year I have learned how to maybe manage some of those expectations a little bit differently. I think I will be learning for as long as blood cancer is part of our lives, and even if our family changes so dramatically, we will then go into a different phase. But there is something about learning how to balance all of the expectations and all of the joy and the gratitude that we are still together as a family, versus but what about next Christmas, which is a bit ridiculous when it's 364 days away, but it's a really natural thing to think about. Will we have this again? And that heaps pressure on, but every now and then you need to just catch yourself and take a little moment if you need, because it's okay if Christmas isn't tinsel, glitter and sparkle 24/7, because actually for an awful lot of us it's not. It's actually the accumulation of another year of difficulty and another year of feeling tired and jaded. But there are moments of joy if we look carefully enough for them, and then savor them without putting huge pressure to make everything count, because everything doesn't count. There are some things that do and some things that don't.
Thanks, Jude. And I think that's really powerful in thinking about how you prioritize what you focus on during Christmas time. And I wonder, Donna, if it's okay to bring you into the conversation now, maybe talking, if you feel comfortable, a little bit about your experiences and how you manage them over the years, and how you're feeling about the run up to Christmas now.
Yeah, so Emily's very first symptom was picked up on Christmas jumper day, when her jumper didn't quite fit. And then her first scan was my youngest daughter's first nativity play. And then Emily's actual official diagnosis came on the last day of school term. And I found myself, thinking to myself, well, if you are going to be diagnosed with cancer, well, actually Christmas sort of worked quite well because the other children were off. So I didn't have the stress of a school run. My husband was home to look after them, and I could sort of be with Emily without the juggling initially. So it's probably quite a bizarre way of looking at it, but actually, if you're going to have that diagnosis, it sort of worked for us. And I think, it's about managing expectations, but also it's not being afraid to say, actually, we might normally do that, but right now that doesn't feel right. Or to say, well, actually, we really want to do that, but we actually don't know where we're going to be with appointments. And it's about being open and honest and doing what works, and that can change day by day and hour by hour. And I think it's just being honest with yourself about what you are going to prioritize, because you can't prioritize it all. And for us, as quite a foodie family, the priority has been food, and it's been about making the food work for us. So that very first year, Emily was diagnosed the 21st of December, and the food was a big focus for the children. So we cooked the Christmas dinner and we sliced it up and we put it into sandwiches. So they had their Christmas dinner sandwiches, very different, very not traditional, but also it was their Christmas dinner. Mm-hmm. And it was about managing their expectations. They wanted their Christmas dinner, but we wanted to find a way of making it work. And so that's what we did. And lots of things haven't worked, and that worked year one. And we wouldn't dream of doing that now. We want dinner on a table with the crackers and all the rest of it, but it's not set in stone, and if you do have to be a bit more flexible, I think it's really important that you give yourself a break and you be kind to yourself, and you do that.
Yeah, absolutely, Donna, and thank you for sharing that example, because I think it shows a lot of that flexibility that you were talking about. And although there are, of course, really difficult things to manage, but as Jude was saying, if you're able to focus on kind of what you can control, or what you want to bring to Christmas, that you're able to, then kind of finding a way around that doesn't immediately kind of sit with the traditions you might have experienced previously, then worth thinking about how you can manage some of that. Gemma, I wanted to come to you just to pick up on a little bit on what Donna was saying around managing a diagnosis or going through treatment as somebody in hospital, or somebody who is supporting somebody in hospital. And we've talked previously about how that might be particularly difficult at the moment. So I wondered if you would be able to share maybe some of the things that you experienced in your career supporting people as a nurse.
Of course, yes. I guess any time of year, a diagnosis is a huge shock. It's you're worried about everything, and then all the plans, whether they might be Christmas plans or birthday plans or anything, seem to just disappear, and this overwhelming reality is there. And I feel it's very important, and I'm sure everyone else on the panel does, is having the time to digest the information, but also having opportunities to talk further about it. Sometimes it's an emergency and things need to just happen, particularly if you're on the wards. But there are other times where it's really valuable to get another set of ears. The information is always a shock. You don't maintain it unless it's written down. You can't refer back to it. So all the different methods of communication are really important. And I'd hope from like a medical and nursing perspective that you are provided with as much of both as is possible. I think getting a diagnosis at Christmas, in terms of the practicalities, there's no difference in that, because the NHS just works all the time to its capacity. I think at the moment, with the pandemic and the restrictions, there are less people able to visit or be present during consultations, which is the really difficult thing. And I think it's about how both the patient or the carer, and particularly the medical team and nursing team, allow that to happen in some way. Now, whether I know from where I previously worked, if there was going to be a new diagnosis, we would make exceptional circumstances to make sure someone would be with the patient. However, if this wasn't possible because of geography or something like that, we have to use our technology that we're doing so now, being able to relay all this as wide as possible. But, using the phone, the speakers, the speaking after the event as well to one of the members of the team is really important. And actually, sometimes when you've received this diagnosis, having someone to talk to after is really important, because it's being able to go back and thinking, actually, what is happening next? It's a massive thing. It's a whirlwind. So I think I'm hopeful that everyone is provided the time, that they're listened to, and then opportunities for further discussions. And independent of pandemic, that should be allowed in, but it won't be ideal. It's far better for everyone to sit together in a room and you can feel each other and you can recognise non-verbal signs as well as verbal signs of communication. But we have to adapt, and I think everyone here has adapted throughout whatever treatment pathway they've experienced, and I think that's how we certainly addressed it previously, and it's how I would advise now. And over the phone, people are ringing and asking, I've been diagnosed and I don't feel like I know where I'm going, and it's about enabling those people to go back to their clinical teams and ask that question again, and allowing and being brave and no one should be worried about asking those questions because they're vital.
Thank you, Gemma. I think such important points there to consider, and I think it's important to draw that line between kind of what you would need to consider at any time of year, but also thinking about how things can be especially difficult emotionally at Christmas because of the kind of the traditions and the societal pressures as well about what Christmas should look like. And I wondered, Sunny, if I could come to you next to maybe talk about if we're thinking around kind of how people experience either a diagnosis or some challenges in their life, but actually things being slightly more poignant at Christmas time, and how you might, the kind of challenges you might experience at that stage.
Sure, no, of course. So I'd only just come out of hospital in 2019, just before Christmas. So sadly, just a couple of months before the pandemic. At that stage, because I'd had such intense treatment for about 6 months in hospital, I was obviously came out not recognizing the person looking back at me in the mirror. And obviously, you know, it took months for the hair to grow back and everything to go back to what I call is the new normal. But in that time, it was very hard to sort of face people who may not immediately have known what I was going through. So I became quite selective in the festive period and avoided certain people in certain situations where I knew I was going to be faced with people that would ask questions on my appearance. So it was quite tough because your social circle really tightens, and you know, that all kind of adds to the effects of the isolation that you may have felt when for the 6 months that you are in hospital within 4 walls. In a way, it really does add to the anxieties as well. And I did quite struggle to kind of meet up with people, and the pressure was there because certain friends or peers knew what I had gone through, and you know, they wanted me to come out and celebrate and say, you know, their opinion was that you've been given another lease of life, why are you not coming out? And it was very hard to kind of just block that out, because you know, you're always going to get negativity and positivity, and it's just about kind of blocking out that negativity and just focusing on the people that are going to really not bring you down, because everyone recovers in their own way, and you know, there's no sort of set time on how long it takes to recover from such an illness or such treatment that you go through. So I don't think people should feel that they're, you know, they have to bounce back straight away. As and when you're ready to face certain people or certain situations, you know, just embrace kind of what you're going through, and you know, trust your instinct and really listen to yourself, because only you know what you've gone through more than anyone else, really.
Absolutely. Again, so much good thinking there, Sunny. Thank you. And I think it's interesting to hear all of you speak, actually, just around the fact that it's almost impossible to separate how you are experiencing an emotion to kind of what the impact of that on other people, but also the impact of other people on you. And I wonder if it's worth just talking a little bit around maybe how some of you might be approaching the day, or kind of your contact with others within your household, but also outside your household. I know that many people are struggling at the moment with deciding whether they do want to go and see friends and family, or stay within their household. Has anyone maybe experiences of last year, but also thinking about what that might mean for you this year? Jude, I wonder if there's anything you wanted to share on that note.
Feels a bit like the great unknown again this year, and I think one of the biggest maybe learning kind of points from cancer in general is you can't control everything, but you can try and control how you respond to it. So we hope to see immediate family only at Christmas, having obviously not been able to do so last year. But when I say they'll be kept at arm's length, I pretty much mean that. For lots of reasons, we are aware that my husband isn't as protected from the vaccines, as we all know. We don't need to dwell on that. So we've shielded fastidiously for all of the pandemic, and we will continue to do so. But there's a little bit of balancing that with seeing people who have stood behind us and rooted for us the whole way. But for us, and I appreciate absolutely everybody is different, nothing is worth the risk of something terrible, COVID related, certainly happening to my husband, and it's just not a risk that we're going to be willing to take. But I absolutely understand those who don't share that opinion. So we will do what is right. We will make our decisions prior to seeing people, and I quite like them to know what to expect from us, because I think it's easier to maybe just say there'll be no hugging, we'll keep our distance, can we have the door open, we'll stay half an hour. I feel setting the parameters around it for my well-being is what's important. Maybe that's because I like to control, but I just think you need to analyze it before you're in the situation where emotions, and you're so excited to see someone and you automatically want to do that. But for us, it's not safe to do that at this time. So yeah, it'll be another different Christmas, but you know what? We mightn't have had this Christmas either. Therefore, there is good. It's a little bit cliched again, but there will be good moments that we will find. And do you know what? Being in the same room, even if you're 4 meters away from someone, is an awful lot better than what we've experienced for 21 months, which is looking at each other. No offense to my husband.
Thank you, Jude. That was really poignant to hear some of your reflections on how to manage that situation, but also kind of thinking, as we start to think a little bit more around how we can manage these situations, how we can actually take control of those, and what it is that we can take control of. I wanted to just talk, before we move too far into that, I just wanted to spend a little bit of time thinking about that kind of social pressure. So we've talked a little bit about pressure from others who might feel like but not quite understand why you don't want to celebrate kind of with them in person, and because of kind of managing risks. Is there anybody who wants to talk a little bit more around kind of the social pressures that they may be feeling from society more generally? Maybe Sunny, is there anything that you wanted to talk about there?
Yeah, of course. So it goes back to, I think, even with the media and everything we're surrounded by is just Christmas, Christmas, Christmas. But you know, you might not want to actually celebrate Christmas yourself. And I personally, I lost my dad to cancer as well, and it was quite close to Christmas. So for me, it was always, the run up always kind of brings back the triggers, and you know, it's very hard to avoid remembering every situation that you were in the previous year or years gone by when things might have been better, and you know, you remember specific things happening, and it can really you know, bring back all your emotions. So you might just want to not think about the whole festive period whatsoever, and you know, that's actually okay. You shouldn't really feel that pressured into having to celebrate it if you don't want to. And I really think it's about taking each day as it comes, because you might have a good day where you want to go out and see people, but that, you know, the next day might not be so great, and you might feel a bit more reclusive and you want to just be on your own, which is fine, you know, but it's just each day as it comes, and not really feel bad if you commit to meeting. You're not up to it, you know. I think that the people shouldn't really feel any guilt, and it's just about managing that. And you know, people, if your friends or family, they should be understanding enough to you know, consider what you're going through. So I think it's all about trying to not give yourself such a hard time as well, because the mixed emotions of Christmas can really play with you as you're trying to manage a loss, or trying to manage what family members gone through. So it can be really tough.
Absolutely. Vidge, would you add any? Sorry, yes.
Can I just add something in there?
Of course, yeah.
So as a mum of 4, when you get to 4 kids, people stop inviting you for Christmas. They don't want to have 4 wild children running around their house. So traditionally, Christmases were at our house. People would come and visit us. And since Emily's diagnosis and since she's passed away, I find it really difficult and really uncomfortable people coming to my home, whether it be just popping for a coffee, but particularly around special occasions. And my children find that very difficult as well, because if everyone is here, Emily is missing. When if the other people aren't here, she's not here. So something that we've done is actually, probably seems quite selfish to lots of people who want to be with their families, but as a household, we disappear for Christmas. We pack up our Christmas tree and we pack up the stocking and we go down to West Wales, and we have a very, what you would think is a very traditional Christmas, but it's in a holiday accommodation away from everywhere else, where it's just us. And that works because we're not at home. Emily's not missing. And we picked Tenby because Tenby was a very special place for Emily, but actually we go away because that's what works for us. And to other people who are desperate to be with their families, and I really understand that might come across as quite selfish, but by being away, it enables us to remember Emily and have those fond memories, but also celebrate Christmas in a way that we want to, without judgment of other people and how happy we are and how we're in the Christmas pajamas and all the rest of it. But it's just, we just move it away from our family home, and that really works for us. And I think it's really important that people find what works for them. And it might not be something that you ever thought you would consider, because if someone had said to me 8 years ago, you're not going to be home for Christmas, I couldn't imagine being anywhere else. But it works for us. Our situation has changed and Christmas has changed. And it just feels like everyone feels they've got permission to be happy and they've got permission to celebrate, because they aren't doing exactly the same as they would have done previously.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Donna. I think that is likely to ring true for a number of people, maybe who've lost someone, not necessarily celebrating in the same way, but just thinking about how they can make Christmas what they need it to be for them and what they want it to be. And I really appreciate you sharing that. And I hope for those of you who maybe that's something a little bit more recent, that could give you some food for thought about what you might want to think about this year. Did anyone else want to come in on that? If we think a little bit more about some of the things that you do want to focus on over Christmas, and how you feel you can cope and how you can manage your emotions or practicalities around Christmas. Is there anyone who would like to talk to that? Maybe Vij? Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, it's more of a case of like people to understand what it is. And I think a lot of people will try and emphasize with regards to wanting to celebrate Christmas. Obviously, we're not the only ones who've been like sheltering ourselves. I think the general public have, and our family and our friends have. And I think there is sometimes not just a sinister way of doing it. It's the fact that they're just wanting to see you and having the opportunity to want to see you. But it's important that they do understand how you're feeling. So I think that what helps is, for me, what has helped is with regards to my cancer, is my family aren't aware of my cancer diagnosis, but because I had a heart attack a couple of weeks ago, they are now aware that there is a medical concern for me. So although I'm not ticking the cancer box in the extremely vulnerable, I am now ticking another box, which they are aware of. And for me, and having that discussion with them, it's really difficult, particularly with Christmas. I think what makes me more anxious is having to talk about what I've gone through to people who I only see barely, like once a year. And I'm like, why are you asking these questions to me? Is it a case of just general chit chat? Because this is the early conversation you can have with me, because you don't want to sugarcoat it, because you know that I've had a tough year and you don't want to talk about anything positive. And I'm like, well, no, because there's times where I do want to think about it. And I think what would be useful is if you had someone who is going to be with you on the day, maybe explain to others, right, okay, said person doesn't want to talk about this. Can we not have that conversation with them? Or try and nip it in the bud of saying, right, well, have those conversations maybe before you all get together, so people can ask those questions, because sometimes they do care. And I think sometimes it can be that confusion. I know that I'm probably contradicting myself, but sometimes people have only now got the opportunity to have this conversation with you because you're now fully aware, you're dealing with it, you've coped with it. And I think that's really important that you take that time. And also just take, I think for you yourself, take control of how other people are going to act. And like Donna said, it's the fact that if you want to not do it, then don't do it. There's nothing wrong with being selfish, because I think that a lot of people, regardless of their views of what's been going on out in the outside world, are doing just that. And I think there's nothing wrong with you doing the same.
Thank you, Vidge. Completely agree around kind of focusing on yourself, what you need, how you can take control, but also around the importance of that communication. And I know that means different things to different people, and there's lots of different relationships that people have to manage, but that focus on communication and being as open and honest as you feel comfortable with around how you are feeling, how you want to experience this, will often allow other people to understand that better and allow better interactions and celebrations or management of that situation as best they can. Is there anyone else who might want to come in? Jude, and then Gemma after that.
I'm just kind of finding myself laughing and learning from, you know, the other people on the call, which is what I really value. I'm just laughing at sort of Donna, you saying about Christmas dinner, the first year being, if you like, in a sandwich. And I tried to do Christmas dinner different that first year. And I mean, I was very clear with family, turkey and ham are not, I mean, we eat them because it's traditional, but actually in this house, you know, pork would be lovely. But I mean, I was met with abject horror, you know, but it's Christmas, you have to. And I can remember, I understood it came from a really good place of it's for the wee one. And I'm thinking, it's not for the wee one, it's because you want turkey and ham. And I should probably have just said, no, but I didn't. And on one occasion, I ended up doing the Christmas shop in Asda, 23rd of December, and I was an absolute broken wreck. There's no other word for it. And I had everything through, and I'm putting it through in the trolley. And I realised at the last minute, I'd forgotten potatoes. And I burst into tears and I sobbed. And the woman at the till didn't know what to do. And the woman behind me didn't know what to do. And it was over potatoes. But of course, it wasn't over potatoes. But the woman in the queue behind me handed me her potatoes and just said, oh, love, I think you need these more than I do. Because all I kept saying was potatoes. And I suppose it is every year I am learning to control the bits that I need to control for me. Because actually the last thing I needed on that day was to be fighting for potatoes and Brussels sprouts and onions, when in reality, nobody in our house even had an appetite that year. And actually just, there is something about learning. And I don't think I would do that again. I think I would just say, this is how it is. This is our house, our situation. We welcome you being here, but it's under these terms. I think you can say that in a way that's kind, not maybe the way I've just demonstrated it. But yeah, it's a learning. And that's the thing. I mean, Sunny and Veg, you know, you're diagnosed less time than my husband, but it's a learning curve. And I think it's giving permission to get it wrong, actually, and then to think, how did that feel? How do I maybe not do that again? It's about nobody else, quite frankly. I really don't care if anyone else was offended by something. I think actually it's about putting ourselves in our unit. As you say, Donna, you know, you do what you need to do for you and your family, and it is about learning that this situation absolutely gives permission to do that and more.
Couldn't agree more, Jude. Thank you. And I think also just really lovely to see that example that you talked through, and actually that little act of kindness from the lady behind you in the queue is huge. And I wonder if there's something around learning to accept those little acts of kindness from others, which sometimes you might not think about or focus on as much when you're kind of in a different place yourself. So thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. Gemma, did you want to come in on that as well?
It was just really briefly, actually, listening to every single one of you. It's fantastic, and I think everyone's got these great points. And I think that what goes across the whole panel is that you have to take a breath when it's available. And I appreciate when you're going through all this, there's sometimes you don't have time to think, but take a breath and think, what do I really need? Who can I call upon and who can I talk to? And I think when you said, Kate, it's about the different ways of communicating what your needs are at this time. When you have a diagnosis, a blood cancer diagnosis, it's about adapting to this period of time and how best to get through it. And if you can find someone you can talk to, that's amazing. But if it's, you know, like for Jude, talking to her husband perhaps about saying, you know, exactly what we want, and this is our unit. And, you know, Sunny and Vid, you may have talked to your friends and just said, gosh, I just need to create some boundaries because I'm not ready. That's so important. And I think and as you've all said, don't be hard on yourself, because no one is experiencing what you are, and it's your time. You don't have to get it right at all. And maybe the Christmas dinner sandwich isn't the way forward, but it's a good try, and you adapt and you change. But it's just really important to speak whoever you think you can talk to about this. Sometimes it's the least expected person that will say, oh, so I'll make sure your friends know, you know, that will just, you know, quickly say, not interested in meeting up, not personal, need to get through the next couple months. And then, you know, and then we change, we move on, we adapt. And as I've always said to our patients, which is very easy when you're not a patient or a carer, but Christmas can actually happen at any time of the year, or any festivity in actual fact. And you know, you can sort of say, we don't have to do it on the 25th. You know, we can see how February is and we can change it round, because you're totally entitled to do that. And there's no rules, absolutely no rules. As we've said a couple of times, your version, at your time and your boundaries. I think that's certainly what I would recommend, and you all do it beautifully. So
Gemma, one year my husband had to make a phone call to Father Christmas.
Oh,
because my son didn't want to open his presents without his sister, and she was just in hospital, and she didn't come home until the 17th of April. So Father Christmas arranged to come on the 17th of April.
This is adaptation.
The Christmas tree went back up, and we found a turkey. We did have to make the Christmas crackers, but which weren't wonderful because we couldn't find them. And it was a glorious day, and we all wore our Christmas jumpers, and we shut the curtains so it felt like it was dark and it was winter.
Yeah.
And we had Christmas in April.
Wonderful. That's exactly right, you know, because it's about the people you're with and their needs as well, isn't it? And actually, what fun. I mean, and doing craft as well, all making your crackers, fantastic. But I think it's such a good way of thinking about it. And you have to change your life when you have everything's up in the air and you're juggling and such. So these things are actually in some ways, but they're straightforward. You do it on your terms. Mm-hmm. And as long as you've got someone to communicate that with, and then the pressure doesn't come over the top, I think that's really important. Then you can give yourself a break, like Sunny said, and Vid said, you need a break sometimes.
Kate, can I just come in 2 seconds? Can I just say, Donna, isn't it wonderful that Father Christmas does find ways to support Christmas no matter how it's happening? And actually there is still that little bit of magic. So Potato Lady in my head, I will never forget her kindness. I'm sure she doesn't remember doing it, but I remember her.
Yeah.
Also, totally. Kate, saying that you were picking up on, you know, it is sometimes about learning to accept kindness, and it can be really difficult to do. And I think most of us, with some distance from our situations, maybe wish we would accept more, or maybe ask for help more. But we all say that people might want to think about that, but it's very hard as an individual to do it. But sometimes you have special people in your life that don't even need to be told what it is you need. We have a friend who's a nurse, so Gemma, just born to be a nurse, and because everything was a bit topsy-turvy in our house, she contacted Santa directly. And on Christmas Eve, in the middle of grief for a life that we were losing at the time, and a future that wasn't as stable, and the real sadness and the sickness that was in our house, Santa Claus came to our house in the middle of a very busy shift, came into our house, wrapped our son up, and just said that he knew it was really, really difficult just now, and that he thought our son was just being so brave and so strong and so kind, and he gave presents, and he gave a present to every adult in our house as well. And we have a video, and it's one of those things we will treasure forever. But what we treasure more than that was somebody not of our blood who recognized that actually all of us needed that magic, in as much as I could still cry talking about it. So Potato Lady and Santa Lady just changed our lives that Christmas and brought a moment that you couldn't pay for, because we had no Santa trip, obviously, that year, for a little boy who was like, oh, will Santa still come? Because there was no Santa letter or anything done in the middle of this cancer chaos. So, you know, that was really just, you know, I'm going to let my friend know that that is something that, well, we did at the time, treasure forever. But I just want other people to know that I think most of us in our lives, if we look, have someone who can be what it is we need, although they can't read our minds. And I think we have a responsibility to say, I'm not okay, or I am okay, or I need. But I think we can work on that at Christmas and in April and in July and in October, whenever we need to. And I hope everyone does have someone just for that little bit of extra support.
Thank you, Jude. I think just such great examples of the impact of those acts of kindness. And I wonder if there are people listening who actually are supporting somebody going through, or have somebody that they know, maybe outside of their immediate family, who could actually benefit from an act of kindness, however big or small that could be. So maybe something to think about if you're, sometimes it's difficult as somebody outside of that immediate situation to know what to do, know how to support people for the best. So maybe some of those examples that you've highlighted could give you some food for thought if that's your situation. I think just running through all of this, there's so many important themes around control, taking that pressure off of yourselves. Is there anything anyone would add to people who maybe feel like they are pressured into, so that, I think that tradition word has, it can be great, but it can be really difficult to live up to. Would anyone give any particular advice to somebody who's feeling the pressure to maybe take risks that they don't necessarily feel comfortable with, particularly given that it's 2021, we've had 2020, which was very uncomfortable for a lot of us, but 2021 has had its own challenges as well. Is there anything anyone might say to somebody who's maybe experiencing some of that pressure? Vidge, can I come to you?
Yeah, for some reason, I've not dealt in as experienced as the others, but I think for me, I think there is a lot of understanding about people wanting to do what they want to do. I think there's the element of expectations, I think, is something that I think has been lowered for everyone, because like we only need to watch the news tomorrow and we'll find out that all our plans have got to change and for whatnot. And I think so. I think everyone is working on an ad hoc, let's see how it goes. And although as much as we all want to get our hopes up in terms of things being like it was, and like Sunny said, is like things being normal, and I don't think they can be normal, particularly when you're going through cancer or lost someone to cancer and close family members. You do remember those people, and nothing does. I used to hate it when my sister passed away, that people thinking, oh, things will get back to normal soon. I'm like, there is no new normal. It's only going to be something. It's just going to be changed. It's a case of adjusting to things. And I think that now, I think it is really important that to have a bit of faith in people understanding and not thinking that, you know what, I have to either these sort of had to do what I say or it's nothing. Sometimes it doesn't need to be like that, but I think like it's important that it's just communications and being able to find that someone that does get it. And if they don't get it, that's fine. You make that judgment in terms of where you go with that person in the future. But I think there is a lot of understanding. I think everyone's opinionated on what is going to happen next and what they'd like to happen and what they think is going to happen. And I think it's a very convenient thing for us to discuss what we want to do and what we feel comfortable with.
So interesting, actually, that 2021 may, for some, be slightly easier than 2020 because people are more used to having to adapt, having to be flexible, and having to think more about what they want and what other people might want. I think that's really interesting, a really good point there, Vidge. Thank you. Recognising that it, of course, may be very difficult for some people still to be thinking about that, but taking that breath, as Gemma was saying, thinking about what do I want, as Jude was saying, and then being able to communicate that to others as best you possibly can, just feels so important. Sunny, is there anything you would add to that, do you think?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Adding on to what Jude said earlier as well. I think sometimes it's really important to set parameters with people, so you're kind of managing those expectations. And you know, as Jude said, if you're not ready to hug people at Christmas, it's always good to kind of set those in motion beforehand, so that there's no misunderstandings, and you know, you don't get carried away in the moment. And as Vij said as well, you know, have faith in people being understanding, because I think with what's going on around us, even more so, people are generally very understanding to people needing to sort of isolate and shield as well. So further from what Gemma said as well, I think it's really important to have someone in your unit who can really set those boundaries with the other people as well, because it's not something that you want to have to worry about yourself. So having someone around you who can kind of speak for you without you having to even say something is also quite important, and it really makes those gatherings and meetings a lot more smoother, and you know, you kind of suffer less anxiety about the situation, and probably just kind of enjoy the moment in itself more so as well.
Thank you, Sunny. And I wondered, Gemma, is there anything that you would say to somebody maybe who has a loved one in hospital, or is in hospital themselves and struggling with recognizing exactly how they can support a loved one, or can kind of reach out to family and friends at Christmas time? Is there any advice that you would give to somebody in that position?
Yeah, of course. I think what's really interesting is that blood cancer patients have always had to have this isolation period in a lot of their treatment pathways, and I think there is more understanding now, as Sunny and Vij said. I think what the advice I'd give is that if you're wanting to support someone whilst they're an inpatient, and maybe you're not allowed to visit, because at the moment the restrictions are still very, very strict. It's obviously different in every hospital, but there's often like only 2 visits for 2 hours each week, and that's not a lot, and it's not with a lot of people. So I think it's important to get a really clear dialogue with your patient, your loved one, your friend who's in hospital, what they want in terms of communication. If they don't want to be bothered with lots of WhatsApp messages and all those things, maybe say to them, should we dedicate someone to deal with the WhatsApp group? And then we can communicate, because obviously everyone will care and want to know updates, but maybe just to identify someone that can be that person who's brilliant tech wise and gets everyone communicated with, and then they can just pass on messages. And then, you know, there may be, sometimes we've suggested to patients, you know, young adults used to look after, perhaps have a pals night when you'll FaceTime each other, sort of like a Tuesday night, and have a kind of diary position. So there is a choice to get out of it. It's not every night that's constant questions, and then to maximize those times when you can have a visitor for a short length of time, if that's possible, if that's safe. Again, it's the same thing as everyone's saying, it's about communication, boundaries. If you're feeling, if you're in hospital, you're generally there for a very good reason and require a lot of care. Certainly at the moment, healthcare professionals will not want people in hospital, and they absolutely have to be. So I think that in itself relays that you should be really mindful of the needs of the patient. At the same time, I think it's really important, if with the patient consent, if they would, sometimes it's nice for them to, rather not giving the information back to their family and friends all the time, that they can liaise with someone on the ward or even a nurse specialist as well, to try and make sure everyone knows what's going on, but it's not all on the shoulders of the patient. And, you know, I think we've learned a lot within the NHS about how to communicate. It's not perfect by any means, but I think the lessons have been learned on how best to communicate and other methods that we've had to engage in, and we're doing so now, as I said earlier, but maybe using your family and friends and those you trust to try and take some of the pressure off, but still at the same time getting that support, love, brilliant tips, ideas on, you know, things that you love, and, you know, silly pictures come through. It just raises a smile, but it doesn't need to be a whole conversation. So I think, yeah, something along those lines, those sort of ideas, and using your resources, I would say, whether they be charities, whether they be nurse specialists, whether they be volunteers or your pals. I think everyone is massively useful.
Thank you, Gemma. I think as we draw this session to a close, I can't believe how quickly it's gone. But I think just thinking about some of the messages that we've heard today around the importance of communication, of boundaries, of taking control, of feeling that pressure, recognizing that pressure, and understanding or thinking about identifying things that you can maybe do to take that off of yourself, and support yourself as best you can. And I think the examples that have been shared today around, actually, tradition is one thing, but maybe this year you need to do it another way, and that's okay. That might be hard, and that's okay too, but taking a breath, taking a moment to reflect on what you want, how you want to celebrate, and how you want to either remember loved ones, remember those in hospital, think about those in hospital, to really get the most out of what you want in the festive period, from Christmas Day, be that on the 25th of December, be that later on in the year. It's about your own Christmas and what Christmas means to you. So I think all that's left really is for me to thank everybody for joining us today. I really appreciate it. A really huge thanks to all of our panelists, because I know there was a lot shared today that's really personal and is emotional for people to talk about, but I hope that it has reflected some of the experiences that some of our listeners maybe have been going through, and I hope is able to give food for thought as to ways of coping and ways of managing through what might be a really exciting, really good, really happy, positive time, but might also be something that's more challenging for others as well. So I hope there's a little something for everyone in what we've talked about today. So thank you very much for that. Have a lovely festive period, however you may experience that. And please remember, we are always here to support. You can call us at any time on 0808 2080 888. You can email us on support@bloodcancer.org.uk. We also have an incredibly supportive forum where people affected in similar ways to what we've spoken about today, and many more as well, are there to support each other and support anyone new who wants to join as well. So please do join there as well if you want to talk. So thank you, everybody. Good night.